Hello there, I am Zalerla, and this is the Joy of Computer Gaming, where we investigate good and intriguing examples of computer gaming history. Today's highlighted game is Telengard, the really random, relax while the room redraws, receive rings of regeneration and refuse, run from wraiths, rest and recuperate before reluctantly re-entering the dungeon game. It's a dungeon crawling RPG written by Daniel Lawrence and released on the Atari 8-bit by Avalon Hill in 1982. It first came out on the Commodore PET in 1978, but it has also been ported to the Apple II, TRS-80, C64, FM7, and DOS. This game was really popular during its time, but it has not aged well at all. Even so, I personally have never enjoyed this game much because it is so slow and so random. There's no point to it at all, I just could never get into it. I'd give it a 3 out of 10. Telengard is a simplistic Dungeons & Dragons-like role-playing game. You start the game by rolling up your character's stats. They're the same stats as D&D, with the same range of 3 to 18. Most of the aspects of the game are taken from D&D. In fact, the predecessor of Telengard is called D&D, 3 letters, also made by Daniel Lawrence. I am highlighting this game because the original D&D from 1977 predates just about all CRPGs and is considered an influence for most of them. Though the map of the game is not random, it's generated with an equation, everything else is. The random encounters I get, but some things like fountains, teleporters, and altars will be random every time you visit them. This game is the closest to plain text I will be highlighting in this series. It has a unique font that is both interesting and very hard to read. This is how the entire game looks. There are very few custom images in the game, just your character and a few of the world objects. Your character is always in the middle, and there are walls and doors all around you. Whenever you run into something, be it a monster, represented by a hash, treasure, a $sign, or a world object, such as stairs or a fountain, it will appear just above your character, and text about it appears below. One thing that is immediately apparent when playing this is how slow it takes to update the screen. Every action, every refresh, has an incredible wait time as it ever so slowly redraws. Moving to a new location is the worst, as it takes about 10 seconds for the screen to redraw. This leads us to the controls and how the game has real time factored in. There are 2 huge frustrations with the controls in this. One, if you leave a prompt waiting for about 5 seconds, the game decides you do nothing. This means that you have to be incredibly patient with the game, while at the same time you have to quickly respond to what the game throws at you. I cannot stress enough how frustrating this is to deal with. 2, if you press any key at all after the last key you pressed, it is automatically pressed the next time you have a prompt. This is again frustrating because you will often press a key wondering if anything is happening in the game, or you accidentally press a key twice, or multiple keys. Make certain you never press enter unless you absolutely have to, because if you have a +50 sword and you find a +1 sword, your character will just happily downgrade you because your last key press was to pick it up, even if the key press happened 10 seconds ago. Other keys will make you do other stupid things as well, though. They really should have had key presses get soaked up just before giving you a prompt to prevent this from happening. Controlling the game is all done with single key presses. When you move, you use A and D for west and east, W for north, and X for south. So close to the WSD set of movements, really, though S in Telengard stays at whatever location you're at. There is a help page that shows all the basic key presses when you are not responding to an event or world object. Otherwise, the corresponding key presses will be highlighted to let you know how to respond. The game world is the most intriguing part of the game. Telengard uses an equation to generate the map, which consists of 50 200 by 200 levels. This gives us a total of 2 million locations. Because it is governed by an equation, it is entirely possible to generate the map of every level outside of the game. In fact, Dan Boris did exactly that and made a program to display the map. However, trying to get in the way of exploration are a number of world objects, and of course the random encounters, not to mention the fact that the game never tells you what level of the dungeon you're on. You'll come across fountains, button boxes, altars, thrones, gray misty cubes, elevators, teleporters, pits, and stairs. Remember our theme of random, because that's how pretty much all of these except the stairs work. Fountains are different every time you visit, with a random color and a random effect should you drink from it. The worst I've seen is being dispossessed, meaning you lose absolutely everything. The best just seems to give you a bunch of spell points. Button boxes have a sequence of 4 with 4 buttons. If you get the sequence correct, you can get absurd amounts of gold from them. If you get it wrong, or if you press a wrong key during the process, you get zapped and have to try again. The sequence seems to remain the same until you open the box at least. Holy altars are never good to run into, as you can either toss money at them, where nothing tends to happen, though on occasion it will say, "You have been heard." Or you can ignore them and have a high chance of being called dirty pagan trash and having a monster attack. Thrones allow you to pry gems off of them, sit on them, or read them. Prying the gems off gives a random amount of money or an encounter. Sitting usually makes you teleport. Reading them can permanently increase or decrease your stats. I think any of them may cause a king monster to appear, which is higher level than normal. Gray Misty Cubes let you put in a number between 1 and 50. According to the manual, this takes you to the level you specified, but may not always work as expected. Elevators are a one-way trip up to the level above you, essentially the opposite of a pit. They are not optional, however. Teleporters take you to a random location. I think they're always on the same level, but I'm not certain. Pits you may just fall into, otherwise you get a choice of going down or staying. They take you down one level. Stairs may go up, down, or both. You actually get to choose whether you use them, and I've never seen anything bad or even random happen from doing so. There are also corresponding stairs above or below the stairs, so you can use them both ways. On the top floor, stairs have light above them. These are inns where you can rest and convert gold into experience. On lower levels of the dungeon, there are tougher monsters and better items. Well, they have bigger pluses anyways. When I got ported down to a low level at one point, I found so much money it was ridiculous. Opening one button box gave me over 45 million gold. There are a number of monsters you will encounter which are in a list of weakest to strongest, starting at gnolls and kobolds and moving up to demons and dragons. You can encounter any of them at a variety of levels, which seems to be a simple multiplier to their damage, health, and the rewarded experience. I have seen some monsters over level 100, but I don't know their upper limit. Ghouls can paralyze you, dragons breathe fire and do devastating damage, and so on. Some of the undead, the wraiths, specters, and vampires, can drain levels. Since leveling gets exponentially more difficult, this can be rather devastating. One of the few useful spells, Protection from Evil, supposedly prevents that from happening at least. Fighting monsters is simple. You have 3 choices: fight, cast a spell, or evade, which means to run away. Fighting deals damage based on your weapon. There is a list of spells available, but I rarely use them, as recovering spell points is generally not possible without visiting an inn or getting lucky at a fountain. If you successfully evade, the monster will pursue you. This is done by showing a circle between the view screen and your stats, and it moves further down the further away you are from the monster. If you move to a new location, even if it's back and forth between 2 locations, the dot will get further away. If you stay in a location or use a world object, they get closer. Teleporting, using a scroll of rescue, or going to an inn makes the pursuers go away. Sometimes monsters will just take an item of yours and run. You did not even get to react, and it seems completely random regardless of your stats or gear. It is very frustrating having an ogre appear and run off with your armor plus 26. They can even do this if you surprise them first. If you have a high charisma, sometimes a monster will like you and possibly heal you completely, or even give you an item. The only items you have at the start of the game are a sword, armor, and shield. These are considered the baseline, and should you ever lose your plus 50 armor, you still have non-plussed armor. The other equipment in the game can get pluses, and that's about it. The items you find in the game are simple. The only weapons you have are swords, and they only get better with bigger pluses. The same goes for pretty much everything else you find except consumables. The sword is how much damage you do. The armor and ring of protection are damage deflection. The shield supposedly also helps with preventing damage, as well as deflecting dragon's breath. The elven cloak increases your chance to ambush enemies. The elven boots cause enemies to miss more often. The ring of regeneration gives you its plus value in healing every movement. The scrolls of rescue let you recall to the beginning stairs, but you lose all of your gold. The potions of healing heal you for a random amount, and the potions of strength give you extra strength, just like the strength spell. If you pick up a second item of the same type you already have, except consumables, it will get replaced. If you have a plus 38 elven cloak and accidentally pick up a plus 3 one, you now have plus 3 one. Sorry! Remember that point of frustration I mentioned earlier about the game remembering key presses and why you should never press enter? Anything else you find in the game, silver, gems, jewels, and the worthless refuse, is just translated into a gold value. Gold translates into experience when you visit an inn, which is the only use for it. Your character is an anything class of an unknown race, I'd assume human. You fight with a sword and a shield and can cast spells, so I guess technically you're a sort of fighter mage. When you create a new character, you have to roll for your stats. This is completely random, like just about everything else in the game. Just roll until you have decent stats, I suppose. You can try your luck at improving stats at a throne. There is one just 2 spaces east and 1 south of the beginning of the game. You start with 1 spell unit and hit points equal to your constitution. When you gain a level, you get spell units equal to your new level and anywhere from 1 to your constitution hit points. This means that even with a maximum constitution of 18, you still may get only 1 hit point from leveling. Leveling to level 2 costs 2,000 experience. Every subsequent level costs twice as much. When you rest in an inn, your gold becomes more experience. However, if you would level more than once, the game stops you at a single experience less than the next level. If you're level 1 and go to the end with over 13,000 gold, you won't get to level 4 or even level 3. The game will show the gold added to your experience, and leveling up immediately drops you below the next level to prevent leveling multiple times. This was really sad when I brought back 57 million gold and watched my experience go up to 57 million, then back down to only 256,999 because of this. Although, shouldn't that be 255,999 and not 256,999? Okay, I think I just found a math error. I never really used the spells much. You gain access to a new spell level at level 3, then every 3 levels until you can cast all 6 levels of magic. The level of the spell is the amount of spell units it costs to cast the spell. It's very hard to get spell units back, so your use of them is pretty limited. There is no music in the game, and there are only 2 sounds, both of which are Atari system sounds. The keyboard click whenever you press a key, and the alert sound when a monster appears or you gain a level. This game is only for the incredibly patient. The huge delays after every action really try your patience. The reward is a game that falls into the bigger numbers category, which for me is a huge negative. I'm not at all a fan of these sorts of random numbers going up games. There's no goal or real point to the game. Remember me saying that the map was the most intriguing part of the game? Well, after playing for a few hours, I realized the map was very repetitious. You end up seeing the same pattern of rooms time and time again with very little variation. This is on level 1. This is on one of the bottom levels. This is back to level 1 in a completely different area. What stuff is in them may change, but the basic arrangement showed up pretty much at all times. This made the game also feel very samey, even ignoring everything else that was repeatedly the same. I made a 6x6 tile that demonstrates this fairly clearly. Vertically, it just tiles. Horizontally, it shifts up a space as it repeats to the right. Put it together a few times creates this repeating pattern. This isn't 100% accurate, but it's so close you wouldn't know the difference without carefully comparing maps to see, oh, that wall there disappeared, or there's a door here at this spot. After recording my gameplay and subsequently making that image, I found that aforementioned map generator by Dan Boris. Yep, it looks pretty darn close to my repeated 6x6 map. Oh yeah, occasionally the screen would get messed up, caused by things such as not inputting a number at a cube. The author knew this was a problem, so there was a replot key to painstakingly redraw the screen should you ever need it. Daniel Lawrence based Telengard off of an older game he made called D&D, all uppercase. D&D wasn't originally written for the PDP-11 and gained popularity while he was at Purdue University in 1977. It has nothing to do with D&D, lowercase, a similar game created by Gary Weisenhunt and Ray Wood for the Plato system 2 years earlier in 1975. Daniel later claimed he had no knowledge of the older D&D game when he made his D&D, though some sources say otherwise. Both are named D&D because they're taking ideas from Dungeons & Dragons, also known as D&D. In 1978, Daniel bought a Commodore PET 2001 and rewrote D&D in BASIC as Telengard, with the final version barely fitting into 32K of memory. The game was done in 1978, but it wasn't picked up and sold by Avalon Hill until 1982. It was released on various systems with quite some differences in each version. Only the Atari 8-bit version has the unique font, however. The Apple II version has a completely different map. It is all done with plain text, your character is just an X, monsters are just hashes, stairs are a flashing slash, locations like altars are just 3-letter abbreviations. Moving is marginally faster, only about 8 seconds to draw. There's no sound at all. The Commodore 64 version actually has graphics, a little sound effect at the intro, and appears to have the same map as the Apple II version. The screen draws a little faster than the Atari here as well, about 8 seconds to redraw. Every monster has a different graphic, as well as the things you find to pick up. It does a few odd tones when you die too. I wonder if it was supposed to be like taps or a similar dirge. The MS-DOS version, which came out far later in 1985 and was rewritten in C instead of BASIC, is probably the best version of the game I've played. It has a different map than any of the other versions. It loads fairly quickly and allows you to use the arrow keys to move. I could move 2 spaces in about a second, which isn't remotely possible on the other versions. Monsters are animated and everything has graphics similar to the C64 version. I died over and over again trying to look around a bit, so I don't have much to show here. It has an intro song, but it was so obnoxious because I hate internal speaker sound, I didn't record much of it. If you're going to try this out, play the MS-DOS version. It's freely available from Daniel Lawrence's Adventure Quest site, which I have a link to in the description. Several sources have claimed that Telengard was one of the main inspirations behind Diablo from Blizzard. Having played so many RPGs over the years, I would have to say instead that Diablo has randomly generated dungeons like Rogue, simple action role-playing like Gateway to Apshi, random powers on weapons and armor like Wizard's Crown, an isometric view reminiscent of Airball, even if Airball isn't an RPG, a grid-based inventory and paper doll system like Dungeon Master, a set of quests from NPCs like Pools of Radiance, point-and-click combat like Ultima 7. Daniel Lawrence went on to mostly work on business programming, though he also worked on Micro Emacs from 1985 through 2009 or so. He never released any other computer games, though he did have his own pen and paper role-playing system called Adventure Quest available on his website. He died on June 7, 2010 due to heart failure at the age of 62. Avalon Hill was largely a producer of war games, a genre of board games I tend to avoid personally. They are known for pioneering the use of the hexagonal grid, among other things. They were bought by Hasbro Games in 1998 and later transferred to Wizards of the Coast in 2004. The name Avalon Hill is being used by WotC for selling board games now, my personal favorite being Betrayal at the House on the Hill. And I think I'm getting far enough off topic that I'm going to be done for now.